Welcome in to Tide and Tigers. Scott Griffin here and Rodney Orr, of course, of Tider Insider and TiderInsider.com with our post-signing day edition. We take a look at all the players, what happened, and different things. A lot of people panicking with what happened with Alabama's recruiting since they're not in the penthouse of recruiting as far as list is concerned. Rodney Orr joins us. Rodney, how are you? Are you about to jump off the ledge here with what happened in recruiting?
Well, it's funny because here they are with the number 6 class in the country. You mentioned that they're not in the penthouse, and some of the reaction among Alabama fans, you would think they're in the outhouse. It's amazing. I mean, there's been years past, Scott, before Nick Saban, of course. He set the standard here. You have to have the number 1 class, of course, but there were years past that if Alabama had the number 6 class in the country, everybody was celebrating what a great year it was. But, that just kind of goes to show you how things have changed.
No doubt. Before we get into specific guys that signed in this latest signing day period, a lot of people are upset because they had to take some 3-star guys and kind of set them straight on that because – if I remember correctly, Miller Forrestall was a 3-star player and became a starting co-tight end with O.J. Howard his freshman year. You've talked about Eddie Jackson in the past. So kind of go into that a little bit. Certainly Alabama gets 5 stars as well many times, but 3 stars aren't necessarily a bad deal.
Marcel Darius was a 3-star.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
What's that contract he's got? About $70 million.
Right.
D'Amico Ryans was a 3-star. Again, I think sometimes you get these guys, Scott, that are 3-star players and they just weren't evaluated correctly or whatever, these networks, however they come to their conclusions. I don't think it's necessarily an indication of whether or not a guy is going to be a great player. You've got 5 stars that you never hear of again. I mean, it just happens, to be honest with you. But, the 3 stars that Alabama got that you're probably referring to would be like Jalen Moody, the linebacker from Conway, South Carolina, who, if you watch his tape, I mean, you can see that the guy's a very instinctive football player. He's very physical. Now, he may not be the fastest guy on the field, but sometimes when you have a guy who knows where he's supposed to be, almost before the play even starts, he can read it. And those types of guys who have those instincts and are just what you call natural football players, sometimes they're as productive as the guys who are more gifted. We've seen that before. So Jalen Moody, when you watch his tape, he looks pretty solid. I'll be interested to see him here at Alabama. And I think the tight end, Michael Parker, that they were going to take as a blue shirt, who they went ahead and signed yesterday, Scott, I really like him. When you talk about a guy who's 6'6", he's 230-plus pounds, he's very athletic, he plays basketball, and he moves well. He's got good change of direction. He's got excellent hands, and all of those things. He just needs to fill out a little bit and maybe mature and develop. But there were some people that told me that they thought long-term potential, he was better than Luke Ford, who was the number 1 player in Illinois and a tight end that Alabama had recruited, who signed with Georgia. So, again, I just think sometimes these stars are overrated, but, regardless, it's something that they kind of keep score with.
No doubt. And Eddie Smith, another 3-star that you have been quoted as saying, you think he's got Eddie Jackson potential, right?
Yeah. When I say Eddie Jackson, I'm talking more in terms of just Eddie Jackson was a 3-star player. And when you looked at him on tape, you said, wait a minute, this is not a 3-star player. He's a 5-star talent. And you say, when you look at Eddie Smith, you say, this guy's much better than a 3-star player. He's a cornerback out of Slidell, Louisiana, Salmon High School. He's got good height. Scott, he's 6'1". He's long-armed. Just a guy that has all the tools that you look for. I think he's an excellent player, outstanding player. He's going to be really good as they develop him. So I feel good about him. And you know what I really like about him, Scott? You talk about all these 5-star players that Alabama gets. You talk about the secondary guys. They had Savion Smith, who they signed as a junior college player this year, was a 5-star recruit 2 years ago who went to LSU. Joshua Jobe is one of the top corners in the country. He may have been a 4-star on most services, but he's a 5-star talent. And you were recruiting Patrick Surtain, who eventually Alabama did get, but Eddie Smith didn't care. He just squarely looked Alabama's coaches in the eye and said, "Listen, this is where I want to be. I'm not running from competition. I want to play. I think I can play here at Alabama. If you want me, I'm coming. If not, I can go somewhere else." And I like that attitude. I like a guy who says, "I'm not afraid of competition."
Let's talk about some of the other guys that Alabama got in this late signing period. You've always been high on Jalen Waddle. You threw out the comparisons to the Deuce, David Palmer, he's the best high school player I've ever seen. So I got excited right there. And Nick Saban was excited about Jalen Waddle. Let's hear from Nick Saban and what he had to say.
Well, Jalen is an outstanding young man. I mean, really a good person. We had him in camp last summer. We've recruited him for a long time. He's got great quickness, change of direction, run after catch. Really an outstanding overall receiver, but would work really well for us in the slot. Has really good run after catch, speed sweep type of ability. So may be a little bit different than some of the guys that we have right now, which is a really good thing. I think receivers are a little bit like a basketball team. You got a point guard, you got a shooting guard, you got a power forward. I mean, all those different kind of guys really make a good receiving corps. So we're excited about him because great quickness, great change of direction, really, really hard to cover. And a great person.
That's what Nick Saban had to say. You're as excited as he is. Tell us your thoughts on Waddle.
Well, we've been talking. You and I have been talking about Jalen Waddle for months and months and months, way back into June, since he came to Alabama's camp and was really outstanding there. And I do think when you look at him, he has a touch of David Palmer in him. He can make people miss in very small areas, Scott. And I'm not talking about just one guy. You remember how Palmer used to have the ability that he could be surrounded by 2 or 3 guys and somehow find a little crease and get between them. This guy has that same kind of ability. But not only does he have that, and maybe not to the level of Palmer, but certainly has some of that. But not only does he have that, Scott, he has the acceleration of Amari Cooper. And wow. I think that's really what makes him outstanding is he's a great athlete. He is a guy with good hands, really good hands, and he has all those qualities I just mentioned, the ability to make people miss, to turn a short gain that looks like it's not got a chance to do anything into a big game. He's got that kind of ability. That's the game, kind of the playmaker, I would say that he is. And if he gets going, he's hard to catch because he has great speed.
Patrick Surtain, another one, a 5-star, this time out of Plantation. Alabama gets him away from LSU. We know about his NFL pedigree. Here's what Nick Saban had to say about Patrick Surtain Jr. at corner.
Well, his dad was a great player and was actually on the Dolphin team when I took the job there and was a free agent and went off, but was a great player for many, many years. And Patrick's a little longer type guy, kind of guy we like here, and very instinctive player. He's got good long speed, uses his length well. He's got good ball skills, good ball judgment, can play man-to-man. Not afraid to get up and press people. That's a good style for him, and that's our style here. So we're excited about having him in the program and really looking forward to working with him.
All right, what do you think of Patrick Surtain Jr.? Many say he could be the next Minkah Fitzpatrick and play multiple positions and do it early for the Crimson Tide.
I think that's very possible. You mentioned his bloodlines. Of course, his dad was a former player in the NFL with the Dolphins and other teams, but also was a great college player at Southern Miss. And so, that I think his dad now being his coach, growing up in the football background that he has, Scott, how valuable that is. Plays the same position his dad played. So he's been around it all his life. He has a lot of natural feel for the game. He has great size. He's about 6'2". He's probably close to 200 pounds. And I like the Minkah Fitzpatrick comparison in some ways. Minkah Fitzpatrick is a very versatile, great football player. So you hate to go overboard, of course, but I do say this. I can see some of the same, kind of qualities in terms of his versatility, being able to play various spots in the secondary. And like you said, Minka played those positions and played them very early in his career as a true freshman. I think that we could see Patrick Surtain kind of, step in and play right away.
I know it's a podcast, but there's some breaking news here. We're going to step away from the recruiting just for a second to get Rodney's response to this story that's breaking now. The Pittsburgh Steelers have hired Carl Dunbar as a defensive line coach. John Mitchell, the former Crimson Tider himself, remains on the staff as assistant head coach. He's been with the Steelers for years. But Dunbar back to the NFL. You remember he got fired from the Buffalo Bills and coaching Marcel Darius, who we mentioned earlier, and then Saban picked him up to replace Bo Davis, and that was a fortunate hire because, as you alluded to back then, Bo Davis, one of the guys he called on for information, was Carl Dunbar. So now Dunbar to the Steelers. Your reaction to that and what Alabama could do?
I really don't think it's a surprise at all. I felt like Dunbar would eventually end up back in the NFL. There was talk that he might stay one more year at Alabama, but most people thought if not this year, Scott, that next year he would be headed back to the NFL. So it's not a surprise necessarily that happened at this time. Now the question is, where do you go from here? I know a lot of Alabama fans have said, well, is there a chance that they might hire Bo Davis? Though Bo has a show cause, he's at UT San Antonio right now. Could Alabama possibly bring him back? And he could not recruit off campus till April of 2019, I think it is. Again, that's something that we'll just have to let that play out, see how it unfolds. If there's a possibility that could happen, Nick Saban would certainly be interested in that. Bo Davis was a great defensive line coach here. His players loved him. He did a great job of developing his players, developing relationships with them, and also in terms of coaching. And he's also one of the best recruiters that Nick Saban's had here. So, and on top of that, to be honest with you, think about this, Scott. All the new faces on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, Tosh LaPoy is the only guy that's returning now when you look at it. Pete Golding's in here now. Carl Scott's in here. And now Carl Dunbar's leaving. So this will be the third new defensive coach added to this staff. So the familiarity issue is that, if you've got somebody that kind of understands the system, that might be very helpful. Bo Davis would be that guy. Now, again, let me be clear. Most people think there's no way that Bo Davis could ever coach at Alabama again. I don't necessarily believe that 100% is to be true, but I also would not say that it's a strong possibility either, because, I don't know how you predict that.
Well, what you say makes sense because everybody's young and new. Nick Saban usually hires that way in many cases, but you're right. The thinking might be, I got to bring a guy back I don't have to sit and explain everything to. And to your thinking, Bo Davis is coaching college football. So it's not like you would be the first one to hire him back with a show cause. So that's an interesting scenario. We'll have to keep an eye out and see on that. To that point, let's hear from Nick Saban on his new young assistants. They were kind of thrown to the fire here in recruiting, Alabama finishing 6th. Here's his thoughts on just his assistants being out there recruiting for Alabama with not much time.
Well, I don't think there's any question about the fact that there may be some prospects out there that were being recruited by somebody who left, and maybe that was a little bit of an issue with them. But I do think that the coaches that we hired certainly did a great job of going out there and trying to develop relationships with the players that we were recruiting. So in some cases, maybe it had an effect, but in other cases, I don't think it did. So I can't really answer that emphatically to tell you whether it did or didn't. But I think in recruiting, especially when you start recruiting guys, 2 years in advance, that when they feel comfortable and develop relationships with people, it certainly can have some effect on, how comfortable they feel with the other folks.
All right, you heard Nick Saban's explanation there, Rodney. Your take on that?
Well, the new assistants as a whole, I think that they've done a great job in terms of hiring guys that are young, enthusiastic, energetic, that have good track records already. All of these guys, Pete Golding did a fantastic job as the defensive coordinator at UT San Antonio. He took a defense in 2 years. He took them from 101 to a top 5 defense. So he's got a great reputation. He's a young guy, Scott, only, mid-30s. I know that the buzz around the football complex is that he's been very, very well received over there. I think he's a guy that's very positive, brings a positive energy to the coaching staff. So I think that's been a good move. I think when you look at Carl Scott, the defensive backs coach that was recently hired, had been the safeties coach at Texas Tech, then was hired by Billy Napier to be the defensive coordinator at Louisiana Lafayette. And then before he barely arrived in town, Nick Saban snatched him away and hired him as the defensive backs coach here. My understanding is that Pete Golding was the one who gave Saban the strong recommendation to hire Carl Scott. So I think that's a really good hire. And then I think also when you look at the special teams coordinator they're bringing in, Jeff Banks, he's already been here for a little while. He had a great reputation at Texas A&M, was very successful there. But not only as a special teams coordinator, he did a tremendous job recruiting. He has great ties in recruiting in Houston, throughout the state of Texas, on the West Coast, in California, Arizona, all in that area. So he's really strong as a recruiter. And then you take Josh Gaddis, the new wide receivers coach. He was at Penn State the last, 4 years with James Franklin, was 2 years with him before that, I think, at Vanderbilt.
Right.
So he's been on very successful staffs, no question about that. And he's done a great job of developing his players, his receivers. They've had a lot of success with their receivers at Penn State under him. But also, Scott, he's done a great job recruiting. And again, I go back to recruiting. Talked about Banks being a great recruiter. We talked about Golding as a guy that has that same kind of potential. Carl Scott. And now you talk about Gaddis, and he was the Big Ten Recruiter of the Year, I think, last year in the previous cycle to this one. So he's done a fantastic job as a coach, as a recruiter, and I think it's a great, great hire as a wide receivers coach.
And in all fairness, Alabama fans need to take a gulp of air, because to finish sixth, as you said, with all this turnover, now here's more with Carl Dunbar leaving, that's not bad considering. Now, the other side of that coin is they didn't land a lot of guys that they had their sights on, that many thought were locks to Alabama. Justin Ross to Clemson. Quay Walker picks Georgia. These are just off the top of my head. So they didn't get some of the guys that they thought they would get. Any inside intel on that, and were you surprised by any? If you can give us some names you were surprised by.
Well, first of all, I think some of the coaching changes probably hurt. When you talk about Jeremy Pruitt leaving, had Pruitt still been here, they would have gotten J.J. Peterson, a top linebacker out of Moultrie, Georgia, who
absolutely
ended up going to Tennessee with Pruitt. So he was a great player. If Ansley also left, Derek Ansley, secondary coach, you talk about Pruitt leaving, Ansley leaving on that side of the ball, probably hurt them a lot with Quay Walker, who ended up going to Georgia. So that hurt them to an extent there. That's two quality linebackers. And Bobby Brown, the defensive lineman, he was unpredictable all along out of Arlington, Texas. It was real disappointing to me the way Bobby handled it, but I can't say that it was totally unexpected. And what I mean by that is, if you decide to go to another school, just let them know. Let the school you're committed to know that you've changed your mind. Instead, Alabama was reassured many times that Bobby Brown was going to follow through and sign with Alabama. And then, you leave a school in the hole, they don't have an opportunity to sign someone, puts them behind the eight ball. So I think it cost Alabama a little bit on some guys. But here's the bottom line on all that. All that aside, Scott, if you throw in 3 or 4 different names, I gave you 3 right there. You throw in another, maybe one more guy, 3 or 4 guys. This class, the perception of it is totally different. Okay, they're number 6 in the country in recruiting. I thought they filled their needs. They got a lot of great players. We could go through them. But if you throw in those 3 or 4 other names, the perception totally changes, and now you're talking about a top 1, 2, 3 class in the country, probably a top 3, number 3, maybe number 2. But regardless, and people are saying, it's unbelievable, for them to put together this class the way they did. But now, because they missed on 3 or 4 different guys, It's kind of the way you finish that's remembered, and people kind of keep that in mind. But again, I know you probably want to talk specifics on some of these guys, but I'll say this. Overall, when you look at this class, there's a lot of strength to it.
Here's what Nick Saban had to say about people maybe talking about the finish and maybe disappointed in what happened with Alabama on signing day.
I think when you have success and when you have continued success like we've had, you become the target sometimes, which I think makes it a little more difficult. People convince players that we have all these players and they can't play here. And I always use the example that we've had some really, really good left tackles here, all of them first or second round draft picks for the 11 years that we've been here. And there's only 1 year that player at left tackle did not start and play. And that's Cyrus Kwanjo's freshman year. Every other left tackle we've had has started as a freshman. All right, but if you get out there in recruiting, they act like we got 10 Cam Robinsons here. All right, we only had one. All right, and he played every down that he was here that he was healthy. And so did every other left tackle. So I think, sometimes quality is misconstrued with quantity. But every player that we have here was told at some point in time in recruiting that they probably couldn't play here and they could play faster someplace else. But we attract the guys that are good competitors, that want to see if they can meet the standard of playing here with a lot of expectation and a great tradition, having a chance to play in big games. And at the end of the day, we're probably better off, with those kind of competitors, and that's worked out really well for us.
As you said, Rodney, the big thing, and as Nick Saban alluded to, is addressing need. They had a serious hole at defensive back, and if you look at the defensive backs they signed, I would argue it is the best, probably by far in America, as far as filling a need. Is it not?
Oh, yeah, I think it's not only filling needs, certainly. I think just when you look at the overall quality and talent of this secondary class, I think it is the best one in the country. And not only that, Scott, I would venture out to say it might be one of the best, if not the best, defensive backs class Alabama's ever signed. I think that's very possible.
Wow.
It's certainly up there. I mean, a few years ago, obviously, they signed some really good ones, too. They brought in Minka and, I guess, Ronnie Harrison the same year. And so those were really good. But, again, I think that this class, when you look at it overall from the secondary standpoint, you brought in Savion Smith, a former five-star player who, as we mentioned, ended up going to junior college after a year at LSU. You've got Joshua Jobe, who is right there. When you talk about evaluating a prospect as a cornerback, Joshua Jobe is right there with Tyson Campbell and Patrick Surtain. So he's an elite player. Jalen Armour-Davis out of Mobile is an elite player. He's an outstanding player. He's a guy that could play a lot of different positions, very versatile, could play corner, could possibly play star, could play safety. And you look at his athleticism, he's a little bit like Minka from the standpoint of that versatility, Scott. He was a great high school wide receiver as well when he had opportunities on that side of the ball. Made a lot of big plays. You could see his athleticism. So I like Jalen Armour-Davis as well. And then we talked about Eddie Smith, and we talked about his talent, and Patrick Surtain and his talent. So, I mean, really, it's an incredible group of five guys that I think are going to be really valuable for this Alabama defense, and some of them probably going to make an impact right away.
Let's talk about what they didn't get. Now, they missed out on Justin Ross and others. I still feel good about the wide receivers with Waddle, Slade Bolden, both slot guys, Xavier Williams, who's the number 26 wide receiver in the nation. I think they're good there. Jerome Ford's the one all-purpose back they signed. They didn't sign a quarterback, but as you alluded to, there'll likely be an announcement here very soon about a quarterback coming in. It would have been nice to sign maybe one or two more defensive tackles and certainly one or two more offensive linemen. Let's not forget, though, Hunter Brannon, the 12th rated center last year, will count. He's a center. Jerez Parks also technically in this class, I guess, from a guy they looked at last year. We know about Ekiyor and Tommy Brown. Those are two top 15 players at their positions. So, again, in quality, maybe not the numbers you want. Offensive line, defensive line, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, on the offensive line, I think if they could have gotten Nicholas Pettit-Freer, the number one offensive tackle in the country, which came down to Alabama, Ohio State, and a couple others, Florida was in the mix, Notre Dame, but ended up going to Ohio State. Again, if they would have gotten him, they would have gotten plenty. They've got a lot of young offensive tackles, to be honest with you. I say a lot. They've got some really good young ones. They've got some good interior players. I think Ekiyor is a big addition inside because he's versatile. He can play guard or center. I think he's going to be a really good player. Was originally committed to Michigan out of Indianapolis, Indiana. So I really like him. On the defensive side of the ball, you're right. I mean, I do think that they could have used, to me, two more. Bobby Brown would have been nice to have kind of kept in the fold, but that didn't work out, unfortunately. And I do think I really would have liked to have seen them get if Brown was not going to be available for you, I really would like to have seen them get Malik Langham out of Huntsville Lee.
Right.
I thought he was an outstanding player. When you talk about potential, 6'5", 270, he's going to fill out. He's a great athlete for his size, played basketball. And then there's another guy that I really thought would eventually end up a defensive end. He's going to Texas, Glenn Bill out of River Ridge, Louisiana.
Right.
And, I just thought he could be I thought he was potentially better than Bobby Brown, to be honest with you, as a defensive end. But, it didn't work out. So you missed on some guys. Some guys hurt you, obviously, Bobby Brown flipping, and Justin Ross, I think, looked like a strong indication that he would go to Alabama. But, I really think that Justin Ross, he just wanted to go to Clemson, Scott. I think he liked Clemson better all along. I think his family kind of preferred Alabama. I thought that would override it, but it didn't. And I just think that Dabo did a great job of closing him at the end. So, and again, look, Justin Ross is a really good player. He might end up a great player. Alabama's okay at wide receiver. We know when I say okay, I'm kind of saying that, facetiously a little bit, if you will.
From a number standpoint, players. Right? From a number standpoint, they're okay. Talent-wise, they're terrific.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Off the charts with those three freshmen, Judy, Devontae Smith, and Henry Ruggs. And then they've got a guy that they redshirted that is going to be I don't know exactly how they're going to use him, but I think he's going to be a great weapon. He's 6'5", 6'6", about 210. Nobody ever talks about Terrell Shavers out of Louisville, Texas, who they redshirted this past year as a true freshman. So keep an eye on him. And then you bring in Waddle, who's different than everybody else, got all the different kind of tools that he's got. And Slade Bolden is just a terrific little player that can do so many different things. So I think they're fine. I'm not trying to downplay that Ross went to Clemson because you would have liked to have had the state's number one player. I just don't see him as big of a loss as I do, some of those defensive linemen.
Yeah, Bobby Brown or Langham. And let's say this.
Correct.
I've thought about this. If these young guys come in, and maybe Maiden does well and some other guys that are on the team now, you could see a Trayvon Diggs move back to wide receiver. Couldn't you possibly?
Well, he's moved around so much. They got to figure out exactly. I mean, I think they think he's got a chance to be their left corner. He won the job last year and then was taken out when struggled a little bit against FSU in the opener. Levi Wallace came in and did an incredible job all season long, just kind of shut down that side of the field. So really like Trevon Diggs' talent. I always thought, Scott, and I don't know if this will ever happen. He started when he first got here, started off as a safety / wide receiver. He was kind of playing both ways, and actually played both ways in one of the games early on.
Yeah.
So I always thought he was an Eddie Jackson type safety. Of course, he's gotten bigger now, but I always thought he looked like when I watched his high school tape, I thought this guy's got a chance to be the next Eddie Jackson or another Eddie Jackson. So we'll see. But right now, I think they think like he's got a great chance to win that left corner spot. But there again, Scott, now with Savion Smith, some of these other guys coming in, it could shake things up a little bit. We could see them move Trevon. I really kind of don't think he'll be on offense, but I will be interested to see if he stays at left corner.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see, no doubt. And we have seen young players play, obviously, for Nick Saban. in the secondary. He's not shy about that. And we saw him do a quarterback twice now, last year and this year. So Nick Saban's going to play the best player, and then he's going to also try to take talent and move it to the best position that he can. So we'll see what happens with all those things. We'll wrap it up here. Also, don't forget, we'll talk as spring training gets closer and different things going on. We'll talk about that and some of the position battles and different things as we go here. Don't forget about TiderInsider.com. It's only $48 a year. You get the incredible message forums, all the information, great articles by Rodney talking to recruits personally, some videos that we put up for basketball, football, whatever. Also, these podcasts as well there. And then be sure you subscribe to Tide and Tiger at podbean.com and then also on the YouTube channel as well. For Rodney Orr, this is Scott Griffin saying so long for now. We'll talk to you very soon right here on Tide and Tiger.